Hello everyone. So in this session we will be covering hooks and fixtures. So we will be seeing what are these Cypress hooks, and we will be learning test isolation and fixtures. So let's understanding. So as we have learned before, Cypress has adopted Mocha's BDD syntax, which fits perfectly with both integration and unit testing. All of these tests we will be bringing will sit on fundamental harness Mocha provides that, namely, so far we have seen it and describe. But actually there are context too. Instead of it, but this is not very common to use. So the important thing in today we will see the before each, after, only, and skip. So these are coming from this Mocha's BDD syntax. So we will see how to implement them. So let's start with the hooks. So Cypress also provides hooks. It's borrowed from the Mocha, as we said before. These are helpful to set conditions that you want to run before a set of tests or before each test. So they are also helpful to clean up conditions after a set of tests or after each test. So the order of the hook and the test execution as it follows. So this before hooks runs before all of your tests. This before, I mean, what I mean by that, so let's just go to framework. And let's say we have a test in here, right? We have dual test in here. Let's say we have like this test block and this test block. So before hook is going to run after this, I mean the before this test block. Like it will run before hook before, then it's gonna run this all tests. And the before each, so before each runs before each test. This is the difference. So while before each runs before this it block, let's say we have a test in here, it will run before this it block and it will run before this it block too. But before hook will run before both of these. It will run just right before our tests starts. And again with the same logic, after each will run after each. Each test block we have like individual test block, and after also going to run after our tests are complete, all of the tests. So let's see in more detail this one actually. Let's do a example together and let's see how those looks like to understand them better. So for now what we need to do is let's create a new file, and let's name this file 07 underscore hooks.cy.js. So inside this, oh, let's just name it actually 07. So inside this one, I'm going to create these hooks and I will show you how these hooks looks like. So first let's create describe test block, and let's say hooks. So what I will do inside these hooks, first I will call this before hook, and it will take arrow function inside. Inside this one I will say cy.log, and I will say runs once before all tests in the block. So after we run our tests, we will see how this prints looks like to make you understand it better. So for this one I'll say runs once after all tests in the block. So now let's call before each. So for before each I will say runs before each test in the block, and instead I will be using after each, and for this one I will be saying not runs before, but it will be runs after. And now I will call our like individual text blocks. Let's name this one example test 1, and in here I'll be saying example test 1. I will create another one, and I will say example test 2 for this one. So let's go ahead and run this one, and let's see how it looks like. npx Cypress open. So I will go ahead and run these hooks, and we will see how this looks like. So as you can see from here, right, we will see before our first test execution, which is the example test 1, which is in here, our before hook run before everything just once. Okay, but our before each runs after the before, and it runs right before each test block. Then our test body, which is example test 1, then after each, then it runs our test. So you might maybe ask like why there is no after, because the execution is not over, because it still didn't execute to test 1. I'm sorry, test 2. That's why we will be seeing our after hook in here, which is in here, right? So again, since before will run before these 2 tests, before will run once, and it will start running this before each, because before each runs before each test, but before just runs before all of the tests just once. It will execute the test, it will execute the after each, and right after it will call the before each again. So this before each, it is going to call this before each block, which is runs before each test in the block. Then it's going to call our test body. Then it's going to call after each again, just like it did in here. Then since our tests are over, then it's going to run after all. So this is a really good example of understanding these hooks in Cypress, and so much frameworks are actually adapts these hooks in so many automation frameworks, like even like in the Selenium. I mean, not like Selenium, but like TestNG, JUnit, Cucumber. So much frameworks and so much like testing frameworks and stuff, they are adapting this approach. So from the real life example, how we can use them? So actually, you know how we can use them? So what we do, for example, let me just pick any test we have in here. So for example, you will see that before any test, we are keep clicking, like calling this front end elements click, front end element click. Like, I mean, we don't need to do it again and again, but do we need in the each test block? Yes. But do we need just for once? No, right? So that's why you shouldn't put this one in the before. Because before you should put some kind of stuff that for, like, let's imagine that actually with fixture we will seeing it when we were covering the fixture. But for now, actually we can use the before each in here. So instead like having this repetitive code block again and again, what I can do is I can just take this one, because all of them, as you can see, clicks on HTML elements, right? So I can just take this one and put it inside the before each, because this before each gonna run before each test. Then I don't even need them anymore. So let's run and see how this looks like, if it's like working as it's expected. Sure, we were using custom commands. So I'm on the custom commands right now. As you can see, all of the tests are working as expected, because before each. Since this before each runs before each test, we can just providing just this one will going to inject all of our tests, which is gonna inject in here too, which is gonna inject in here too. Maybe you want to do like, for example, clearing the cookies after your each test. You can also add this one on the after each too. You can put it on top, doesn't matter. The execution Cypress is always going to execute before this one each test, whatever you use, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to use on the bottom. Let's say after each. Inside here I can put, let's say, clear cookies. So after each test it's going to clear the cookies for us. As you can see, our also after each is everywhere to clear the cookies. Sometimes, especially on some products, on some web applications that is on the like development stage, you might need this. It depends on the company, but you might need this. Maybe like they might require you to use this one, so you can use this for the after each. But since the Cypress is like providing it dynamically, for example, like these each hooks, like this each test block, you can use them easily. And also, for example, we have discussed before that our command.js, actually inside the support folder, our command.js and command end to end, the code that we provide here always runs before, like runs before this each test we have in here. And actually, if you want, you can always put this any common stuff between your tests inside your end to end actually. So for example, inside to end, you can just provide this. Let's just do it here, for example. By the way, in the each test we don't click HTML click, right? So that's why it shouldn't be on the end to end, because this end to end gonna reflect all of your tests. So I can just take this one, for example. I can just put it in here. And from here, I can just remove this one. Then on the custom comments, I can just remove this one, because this before each is gonna come from here. Let me say this one in here too. And as you can see, it is working as is expected. We have two before each, and this before each coming from the end to end, since as I told you, this end to end and the command.js inside the support folder, always Cypress Runner executes it before all of our tests. That's why this one runs first, and it just starts on this one. And these are all like together is connected to each other, because it already knows the URL from here that we directed. So we have seen hooks in here. Just do this one, right? Now another topic. Let's go. Yeah, we have additional note in here. So as I mentioned in the while explaining the class, the support files are a great place to put reusable behaviors such as custom comments or global overrides that you want to be applied and available to all your applications. Support file can be configured to another file or turned off completely using the support file configuration. So from your support file, which is actually means like support folder, you can import or require other files to keep using to keep things organized. So this is just an example that I showed you actually, like for example, like putting these hooks in here. So you don't even need to have this test block in here. You can actually even just increase it, like to make it more details. So you can define behaviors in before or before each within any of your support files. But as I say, preferred is the end to end. Let's say you're gonna import anything. For example, you can just import, if you just think about it, like a dependency, right? Import a dependency. You can just directly import it from here. For example, if you can see like Cypress commands that we have in the commands in here, already imported in here. That's why whenever we call any custom command, Cypress understands that it's coming from there. So as I say, Cypress executes the support file before the spec file. For example, when Cypress executes a spec file via Cypress open or Cypress run, it executes the file in the following order. First support end-to-end JS, then our spec in the site to end-to-end JS. So first it will execute this one, then it's going to start and execute our tests inside of this end-to-end. This is how execution run in the Cypress works. So let's see only and skip to. If you guys remember, for example, while I was doing some tests to, for example, like make them not run, I was just commenting out, right? And if you remember, I told you actually there is a easier way to do this. So what is the easier way to do this? Let's see that together. So let's say we have again this login file, and I only want this test block to run. It doesn't matter like I run everything or not. I only want to run this one. All I need to do is I will just put here Cypress, I'm sorry, like it only. So putting this command it only will always going to exclude all of the other tests. For example, you can have this one in here, doesn't matter, it's gonna just ignore this one. Let's see together. As you can see, it's not even running this test at all. If I bring it back, you will see, you're gonna see like two individual test block in here. See login functionality and login functionality. So it's not working as expected, but I can just go ahead and also I can say skip this one. Let's say I have some stuff that I didn't finish in here, but I don't want it to affect my execution. I also don't want to command out. All you need to do is just it.skip. Now you will see it's not gonna even run this one. It's just showing this like icon in here. I think this just means skip, for example. And you see like from here, I think like one success, no failure, and one skip. Again, I will do it. You will see the same. It's gonna even work from the command line too. So if you guys remember right now, let's say I will kill my test runner. For example, let's say I'm going to run my test via command line. So I will say npx cypress run. So we expect it to run everything, right? So since there is it only in here, it's gonna ignore everything. So when we come to this like individual test block, you will see that it will be ignored. Actually, we have like skip in here. Let's actually run directly from the spec file. So I'm just gonna say like rename, take this one, and I'm gonna say dash spec. Actually, we have to provide this delta path. So I will say this, and you will see it's also gonna ignore this one too. But let's just remove it actually, skip. Let's run this way. So you can see it didn't even show, it already skipped the one that we have on the top. Let's say I only put skip in here, I rerun the test. It's gonna show it on the skip step. Because right now it's not showing on the skip because we didn't put the skip, right? But right now we put the skip, so you will see skip is 1, 2. Maybe it's not showing us because we have only in here. Oh yeah, since we have the only, since it's when you put the only, it's already skips this one. So I will just save it and run this one again. And now you will see skip as 1. Or actually, instead it's showing on the pending, actually, not on the skip. That's fine. So this is the power of skip and only. As I say, for skip, you can use it. For example, let's say if you don't want that test block to run, maybe you are not done with that. Maybe it's also related to another individual test block. So you can just skip by this command. But let's say you have like debugging purposes, you only want to run individual test block, so you can just use it with only. For now, I will be just removing it. Yeah, this is also important. Be cautious when using only or skip, especially if you are committing the code to shared repository. Accidentally committing a only can lead only one test to running in your CI/CD pipeline. Definitely, this is what I told you. While a skip can lead to tests being ignored. Always review your tests before committing to ensure that you haven't inadvertently left these modifiers in your test code. This is important because the the putting the test on the version control means that it's also going to reflect on the CI/CD pipelines too. So that's why maybe that test also needs to run, but maybe you forgot there. Always that's why always make sure that it's not there. So let's start with the fixtures. So Cypress provides us with a feature to derive the data from external sources. We can draw a comparison to the data-driven frameworks. There are some types of frameworks. We will be covering it in the future, like behavior-driven framework, the test-driven framework. For example, what we do right now is a test-driven framework and a data-driven frameworks. And what we call to data-driven frameworks are basically these frameworks reading the test data from the external resources, like Excel file or like maybe JSON file. But these are some external resources. So data-driven frameworks, which are one of the popular automation testing framework types in the current market, similarly, Cypress has provided the same functionality in its architecture, where we can read the data from external files, known as fixtures files. Fixtures are used to external pieces of static data that can be used by your tests. Fixture files are located in Cypress fixtures by default, but you can configure to another directory. So you will typically use them with cy.fixture command. So let's get into more detail and let's see how it looks like. So we are utilizing the cy.fixture command to load the example JSON file located in the fixture directory. So if you look at in here, you will see this fixture folder in here. Inside the fixture folder, you are going to see some automatically created commands in here. Like we have example.json, we have like profile.json, we have users.json. These are like some random users. This Cypress is providing to you, like implicitly. Most probably it's using for this example for tests in here. So basically we utilize this cy.fixture command to load the example JSON file located in the fixtures directory. This command retrieves the data from the file, that fixture file, and you can also change the like directory of this file too. It doesn't have to be inside the fixtures always, which is then passed as an argument data to subsequent then callback. So from this data, we can access any values present in the example.json file or anything that you provide in here. It doesn't need to be only example.json file. So in our case, we specifically fetch the email and password attributes. In here, you can see from the example, we are fetching this email and password. So by assigning these values to this email and this password, because these are going to reference the objects inside this JSON file, we store them in the Cypress shared context. This ensures that these values are accessible in other segments of our test suite, such as within the it block. So utilizing the fixture data in the test block. So in the test block, we are leveraging this context. By the way, this is really important to understand. So in the test block, we are leveraging the this, which is the keyword context, to utilize the data we previously stored from our fixture. So for example, cy.get username type this.email. Here we are using the email value that was extracted from our fixture and stored in this email. So this.email actually. So by referencing this.email, we are dynamically populating the username input field with the email value from our example.json fixture, because this is where we define. We call the cy.fixture and we are saying that we want to use this example file. Then we call this callback and we are just retrieving this data inside this example. So also the cy.get password type this.password. In a similar fashion, we reference this.password to type the password into corresponding input field. This password is the one we stored from the fixture in our before block. So throughout this test, this.email and this.password serve as references to the email and password value we fetched from the example.json fixture file, allowing us to use dynamic external data on our tests. But there is a one mentionable note in here, so please keep it in mind. For example, when we are using, if we go to our tests, let's say we have login in here, right? If you mention in here, you will mention that we are always using this for describe and it block arrow function, right? This is what we do, but there's a problem with the Cypress. So if you're going to use fixture, you should not use arrow function. Instead, you should use like function callback directly instead of arrow function. And this is what I extra mentioned in here. So if you stored and access the fixture data using this context object, make sure to use function, just this one, call as a callbacks. Otherwise, the test engine will not have this pointing at the test context. So when we say, for example, if we don't use this function callback in here, also as you see that for this one we change this one to, we make this one function callback instead of arrow function. So it's not gonna be able to reference this data inside this fixture. It's gonna fail because arrow functions has their own this context, and it's not being able to reach the information inside the another test block, another block. So that's why we have to retrieve this by using this function callback instead of arrow function. So let's see an example. So I'm just gonna integrate in here actually directly. So what I'm going to do is I always do is actually skip. So in the describe, I'm gonna create a before. By the way, for the fixtures, all you need to do is just calling it once. You don't need to call it like in the before each and before each again and again. So just calling it once with it's going to work as it's expected, and you don't need to like worry about it. But of course, make sure that you are just providing the cy.fixture, because this is important. Without that command, we are not going to be able to fetch this information. But as you can see in here, all we need to do is just call this block and use the files as it's expected. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to call this before block, and inside this before, I'm going to call this cy.fixture method. By the way, to get advantage from the fixture file, you don't even need to do import. This is one of the best things about this fixture concept of the Cypress. Normally, if you want to fetch something from the JSON file, you have to import the JSON file. But fixture, you don't need to do that. Cypress engine is already solving it for you. Then in here, I have to mention my file name, which is example. I'm going to use this JSON file inside the fixture. Then we will call our fallback, and inside this callback, we are going to reference this. For example, we will reference this, let's say, data, and inside this data, all we need to do is this dot, let's say what we have in the example. We have email, we have name. Actually, let's also add in here, for example, we can add an external data in here and say username, let's say tech global, and let's add password, and let's say test 1 2 3 4. Now from here, since I'm gonna fetch this username and password, all I need to do is this dot username is equal to data dot username. This is all I need to do. Then for password, I will do this dot password is equal to data dot password. Now from this one, you will be able to reach out the information. But the important thing in here, actually, make sure that, as I mentioned before, I missed it here, for example. By the way, since we have only one test block, it's gonna skip this one. We can use the before each, and instead of this one, as I mentioned, you should use function callback. Okay, you shouldn't use the arrow function. So that's why, since we're gonna use function callback, we don't need this arrow function anymore. And also, again, make sure that you will not use arrow function here. You will use function callback, or you will not be able to retrieve the information. I'm also gonna just comment out this one because it's distracting me. So from here, what I'm going to do is basically, instead of just getting this tag global and test 1 2 3 4, I can get them dynamically really easily. So from here, all I need to do is I will just go ahead and I will say this dot username and this dot password. So let's run and see how it looks like. So I will go login, and if you go here, as you can see, it already write our password. It's here, I guess. Yep, as you can see, we write tag global, and we don't even have tag global if you see in here, right? These are coming from this username and password, not from here, of course. It's coming from hooks. You can add more information in here, you can change information in here. It's all dynamic. You can use any type of JSON format in here, but it is pretty much easy and straightforward to interact with this username and password. And also, you can just add these fixtures in your git ignore too. So these can be some kind of sensitive data, you know, for example, like using your username and password for the security. And since it's not gonna directly look in your framework, it's gonna be hidden information for your company. And mostly in the fixtures, we are using, like for example, like you can see an example in here. We have like bunch of users in here that we can use in anywhere else. We have profiles, for example, user profile. You can also use in the API test too, which we will see in the future. And as you can see, this is the example one, and that's what we are using. Let's recap this one. First of all, this method is allowing us to interact with these files inside this fixture folder. And as I say, if you want, you can change the place of this folder, like direction of this folder from the configuration, Cypress config.js. And all you need to do is also making sure that instead of using arrow function, you are using function callback. And also change this all each block. This is really important. If you don't, your test's gonna fail. There is a workaround of this one too. Instead of using this, you can use global this actually, but this is not suggested because this is more direct to reference to object. This can cause you some test failures in the future when you're gonna have like so much hooks and etc. Well, that's why this is a more safe way to use. As I say, arrow function has its own this content, that's why it's not able to reach the information inside the before each. That's why we are using the information, we are using our individual test block with function callback, not with arrow function. So this was all about our class. We have covered the hooks and the fixture. So see you on the next lecture.